Ad Yack.
You're listening to Ad Yack. Ad Yack is the official podcast of the AAF Greater Lehigh Valley Ad Club. Our mission is to inspire creativity and enhance the professional development of the advertising and marketing communities where we live and work. I'm your host, Bill Childs, and I'll talk with artists, designers, writers, directors, photographers, along with those who work in a creative capacity. Our aim here is to serve as a creative resource to help you stay informed, entertained, and above all, inspired. Jen Borror is the owner-operator of Hoot Design Studio in York, Pennsylvania, and is an award-winning illustrator and graphic designer. She's worked in the design and marketing industry since 2004. Before her father's passing in 2019, she felt inspired by his words. "Life is short, Jenny. Do what you love now while you have the time." She took her father's advice to heart and opened Hoot Design Studio to focus on her passion and love of pen and ink illustration and graphic design. In this episode of Ad Yack, you'll learn why she's glad she didn't listen to the naysayers who told her to pick another line of work. And she shares her story on how she was able to make the leap from employee to entrepreneur, and why if you're going to fail at something, it better be at doing something you love. Her beautiful hand-drawn illustrations and designs can be found on stationery and cards at Papyrus and American Greetings, beer can labels at Monument City Brewing, Wallenpaupack Brewing Company, moonshine labels for Bald Hills Distillery, Mud Hen Brewing Company, and her illustrations have been used in children's books, fabric, wallpaper, beer coasters, pillows, stickers, and more. Jen is an eternal optimist, and I'm grateful for her for taking the time to share her insights with me. So here's my Ad Yack with Jen Borror. But first, I want to thank our sponsors, ASR Media and Lehigh Valley with Love. We appreciate your support and collaboration. Jen Borror, welcome to Ad Yack.
Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you here. I've been looking at your work and so cool. I love what you do. There's so much on your website that I was looking at, and just the sheer amount of it. We'll get into that in a second, but walk me through a little bit about your early career. You know, how did you get started? And is this a career that you chose, or did it choose you? I always wondered that about people that go into this field, because I think that a lot of times in a creative capacity, the career chooses us. So
that's definitely true. Yeah, it's definitely not something that I would have thought of like right out of college, like beer labels. You know, it's nothing that even popped into my mind or, you know, a possibility at that point. Breweries are definitely canning more with the pandemic. So that led to the opportunity for more labels. But yeah, I've been, you know, a graphic designer out here for almost 20 years. So I've been just, you know, doing the hustle, working full time as a graphic designer at different companies and agencies, freelancing on the side always. Did my first beer label probably about 4 years ago. It was a freelance project.
Okay.
And it was, you know, awesome to be able to incorporate my hand-drawn illustration and artwork, because typically with, you know, the graphic design work that I'm, you know, was used to doing is the pocket folders, the logos, catalogs, you know, I didn't get to draw. So this kind of was the light bulb moment of like, what is this? You know?
Right. Okay.
I started entering contests and I won a label contest. And from there, it just kind of started to snowball and started looking for more clients in the industry.
So how long have you been in the industry? Not the beer, just as a whole.
2004 as a graphic designer.
Okay. And did you work at any traditional agencies?
Yeah. Everything from like one of my first jobs out of college was at Fast Signs. So I was doing all kinds of banners, murals, sign production. From there, I went to Industrial Recovery Services for 7 years.
Okay.
I was a senior graphic designer doing all the postcards, marketing for the auction, HTML website stuff, email campaigns. Then from there, York Wall Coverings, I was the lead marketing coordinator for all the trade shows, packaging, designs, the full catalogs for the roommates division. From there, Jarvis Green Design Marketing as senior graphic designer. That's an agency. So I got my hands, you know, working with a lot of different builders and building industry, doing branding and all that good stuff. So,
And this was primarily in the York area?
yeah, York.
Okay, so you're still based in York. Okay. One of the things that Steve Jobs used to talk about is how over the course of a career, when you look back, you might not know it at the time, but you can see how the dots can connect. One dot connects to the other dot, and it just all connects. How do your dots connect? Like, how do you connect those dots to what you started out doing to beer can labels, or do those dots not connect, or do they?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a great question, because they definitely do. And it's something that early in my career, like fresh out of college or just working some different jobs or even freelance or dealing with that difficult project or client, you didn't see it then. But now looking back, the experience and the skills that I developed for working for large companies like York Wall Coverings to a small mom and pop agency, just learning the processes of what works, what doesn't work, how to deal with a client, changes, when you screw something up, what happens, and just there's a lot involved that you don't learn in school, so that hands-on,
Right.
it's definitely like you definitely connect all the dots of a project that I'm working on now reminds me of something I learned 10 years ago, that like, oh man, like if I didn't go through the trenches of all these things, I would not know how to do it now.
That's interesting. Yeah, I like that. One of my first jobs out of school, right out of high school, and I might have talked about this on my first podcast, but I'll tell it to you real quick. I worked at a sign company here in Allentown, and my main job was to lay out letters, doctors' names. Okay, now this is before computers, so no one was typing the names in. I was lettering the letter, or using an X-Acto knife and placing each letter single-handedly, right? Vinyl lettering. Well, guess what? When I placed a Y down and an O, I didn't place it the way a computer would and leave that awkward space, right? So what I was actually doing was something called kerning, but I didn't know that it was called kerning because there were no computers yet, tracking, kerning, whatever you want to call it. So I got really good at letter spacing, like really good. And designers that have worked with me know you never show me bad kerning, because like I will send the design, I will go, get out. Like you can't even have this discussion. Look at your kerning. Like it's like, I don't know. I think it might actually even be like some kind of OCD thing now, because everywhere I look, I just see bad kerning.
You're constantly, oh, I do that too. There a horror story years ago. I woke up and looked at my alarm clock and tried to kern the numbers in between. I'm like, there's too much space.
It drives me nuts. And I see it on national TV programs. I see it on movie screens. I watch credits and I'm like, come on, it's not like you were using a font that's like, specifically, if it's an old school font, to try to look like there's extras. No, you just totally got lazy there and forgot to move that O next to that Y or whatever. So, interesting about how when you learn, you do something, if you're smart, you remember what you did so you don't do it again when that comes up. So tell me a little bit about your creative process. How do you start these things? I mean, I've seen so many different labels on your site. The sheer amount of work that's up there, it's cool to go look at, and there's just so much neat stuff. I recommend everybody after this podcast go to your website and look at your work. In fact, what's your website URL?
It's hootdesignstudio.com.
All right, there you go. Because it's just So tell me about your process.
Well, depending on the label, if it's like the traditional, I'll grab this one for instance from Wall and Paul Pack. If it's the pen and ink, typically, no matter what design I'm starting with, it'll be a pencil sketch. Just the concept of, after the design brief with the client of, hey, we want this, this beer, it's going to be called smallmouth. So we want a smallmouth bass, fish illustrated. So I started on some sketches of what he's going to look like. Is he jumping out of the water? Is he flush on? Just some thumbnails to kind of get the conversation started. Once we land on like, hey, this is what we're thinking, Then I'll do the full illustration if it's pen and ink or a Procreate digital drawing. Once that's finalized, it'll either be scanned and digitized, or if it was already drawn digitally or as a vector, then I already have it in the computer to then take into Photoshop to, like in this instance, we kept the pen and ink, but then did some, coloring of the fish, the pattern,
Right.
background.
Now, do you show the client the pencil sketches before you go to start working out the pen and ink? Whatever you do,
Yeah,
you get the buy-in there. Okay.
Yeah, keep them included every step of the way of, like, how's this looking? What do you think of this? Do you want the fish to be doing something else? Is it just a flat on, are we doing something creative? A lot of times instead of realistic, are we doing something cartoony? So yeah, definitely including them along the way in that creative process until we get to, the graphic design of the label with putting the name, the layout, the UPC, their logo, and then sharing the comps and revisions along the way with that.
Okay. How do you find that process? I mean, do you have, are the clients difficult? Do they understand? Are they, how many times do you have to kind of go back to the drawing board and start over? What's been your experience with that? Because I mean, I've had it all over the board. I've had clients where I presented logos, I presented one, and they loved it. And then there's some clients where I remember the one time we were doing a catalog. I think we did 30 versions of this catalog cover, and they couldn't pick. I think we just there was just so much choice. So what's your experience? What are you seeing?
Definitely all across the board, depending on the client. If it's someone that I've worked with for several years that already understands and knows my process and can kind of envision what it's going to look like from that pencil sketch to the end. If we've already done this, this rodeo dance a couple times together, then they kind of trust me and they're like, hey, this is awesome, keep going. If it's a new client, then there's definitely a learning curve, and I try and explain and share and show and hop on calls or a Zoom and create mood board styles and try to walk them through it, because then it's less time that I'm spending drawing, getting wrong perhaps, and having to add to the invoice or it being above budget, the scope of the project. So it really varies. And, a lot of times it varies on the size of the company too. If it's a smaller company that may not have ever worked with a graphic designer before, so they're not sure what to expect. So seeing a sketch might look like, oh, is this the final thing? Is this what it's going to look like? So just having to kind of hold their hand and educate them along the way. But yeah, it's
right. And I would imagine too, you have clients that probably are a little bit more edgy, a little bit more willing to take a risk on some things. And then probably some that are just kind of like, wow, like you took my concept and you watered it down so much. It's almost like not even existent anymore. Right.
Yeah. It's such a variety of the scale. It's either like, hey, we hired you to do it. We trust you. We know it's going to be great. Just do it, make something awesome. And then on the other hand, it's, just move this to the left and move it up. And, it's their baby. So they're literally being that keyboard puppeteer of every little inch of the way, and it's like, which sometimes those can be the difficult clients, because it's like, I want to put my creativity into it, but then you feel stifled and boxed in that you're trying to meet the needs and the vision they have, but you can't really explore other ideas. So
right. Interesting. I tell you, the one label that I noticed, I was looking at your site last night, harmonic convergence.
Oh yeah,
that's probably my favorite one. I just really like that.
Yeah, that was super fun to work
on. The black can and just the way it, and I love too how you show kind of like the can and the design, and then the two ends. You really get a sense of what that whole label looks like. So yeah, so it's cool. So okay, so you're experiencing a lot of what I've experienced in my career with presenting. There's times where I've had clients that trust me implicitly, and they'll even say listen, you didn't create this for me, you created it for the customers that we're trying to go after. So if you say this is what it should be, that's what it should be. I can probably count on one hand the clients that I had that allowed me that freedom. Sadly,
it can be few and far between, and it's definitely I did a speaking engagement with York College the other month, and I was telling the students that it's he who has the gold rules. So, if the client is paying me and the check doesn't bounce, I do whatever they want. I can suggest and recommend things and say, hey, I think we should try this, or, what if that? But at the end of the day, they're paying me to do a service. So
Right.
if they want this fish jumping and dancing and on roller skates, that's what they're going to get.
But what if it's something that like you just you don't want to compromise on? You're just like this is what it has to be. It would be so cool. How do you skirt that line? What do you do?
Definitely show them ideas, sketch it out. If I think the fish should be on roller skates, maybe
Mm-hmm.
I'll do a little cartoon version of like, oh my gosh, I think this would be so eye-catching. What if, but not go too far or push too loudly, because you could lose the client. And ultimately, you want to work with that client some more. So, I respect the boundary of just kind of seeing what they think. And if it's no, we wanted a realistic fish, then okay. So
Okay.
it's a soft sell sometimes.
So that leads me to this question. How do you get your clients?
It's been kind of working, just networking, like word of mouth, since the more I do and the more I put out there in the world on Instagram, social media, the more other breweries find me through, the post and my website, the SEO on my website. But usually, mainly, especially with the breweries, it's networking, because there's so many in a close area. They see other cans, somebody
Mhm.
knows somebody else, you're having a beer and like, oh gosh, there's a brewery, you should meet Jen Borror, she illustrates, so it's kind of the word of mouth.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today is in the mid 70s, the country went crazy with beer cans. And I got caught up in this. I was a kid. I was like 14, 15. I couldn't even drink the stuff, but I was fascinated by the designs, right? The designs that were on the cans. So that I think was obviously an early love, because I loved design. I loved art. I loved that aspect of it. But then the whole country was collecting beer cans, like kids from like 10 to like 18. And then older people got involved in it. And this was back when cans were steel, like not like the aluminum, can. These were steel cans that were like, and I still have my cans. There's 900 of them. They're packed away up in my attic. And I have some really cool stuff up there. I would love, one day I have to get it out and look at them. But also, I'm a big pen and ink guy. I love pen and ink drawings. I do a lot of the stuff I do is mostly like buildings, like architectural renderings of buildings and schools and stuff like that. But so it was kind of like to see you getting to marry two things that growing up I always loved to do: pen and ink, and I beer cans. And to have that as a career, I just think is just so cool. Like what do you love the most about what you do?
Being able to draw, because my whole design career has been that print production, graphic design. The logos incorporate the creativity, but it's been layout and hurry up and get it done and just get it done, get it out. And it really stifles the creativity. And I think being able to be an artist again and illustrate and use artwork that I created from scratch on a product, on something that someone's going to see, is the most rewarding part of what I do. And, just kind of like to look back as a kid or even in high school and think of like, all the mentors at the time that were telling me, I need to pick a different career because you're going to be a starving artist. There's no work out there. Just go get a factory job. You would be more successful than trying to draw for a living. So I think that aspect is, again, the most rewarding part, just of like, hey, I made it. I get to do something I love and get paid for it. So that's the coolest part.
Well, that leads me perfectly to the next thing I want to ask you, because I remember reading this on your website, and I thought, when I talk to you, I want to ask you about this. Your dad said something to you that his quote was, "Life is short, Jenny. Do what you love while you have the time." And I think what you said or were alluding to there is he kind of inspired you to kind of say, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go on my own. I mean, is that a fair how those two things kind of came together?
Yeah, absolutely. At the time, I was working full time for an agency and freelancing on the side, and freelance was starting to pick up, but I didn't quite have enough that I felt like I could take that leap of faith.
Mm-hmm.
So I always just continued to work. It felt like two full-time jobs, trying to manage the freelance in the evening, work the 9 to 5, the traditional job during the day. And I was just miserable, honestly. It
Mm-hmm.
was just working all the time and every weekend and late nights. And, my dad was diagnosed with dementia and he was in a nursing home for 3 years.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
try not to get emotional. But, one thing he always reminded me, take the chance while you have it now, because you don't know how long you have.
That's
Um,
awesome. That's so great.
so yeah, it really it gave me that push of motivation to, why not try it? If it doesn't work out, I'll just go back go back, find
Mm-hmm.
another 9 to 5 traditional work. But at the time I wasn't able to do the creative things I wanted to do. I couldn't incorporate my drawing stuff. And it turned into, like, again, I said before, a keyboard puppeteer where you're just move it up, make it bold, add a starburst.
I
You've been
never
there,
heard
I'm
that term.
sure.
That's an accurate keyboard puppeteer. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm going
you're
to
just
remember that one. Yeah.
relaying what someone else is doing, that,
Mm-hmm.
or mouse control, basically, like someone
Right,
wants to
right.
hold your hand and just kind of like, oh my gosh. So, I was going through a lot of different things at the time, with the passing of my dad. And I decided, I asked my boss at the agency if I could go part time. So I
Mm-hmm.
went to 3 days a week instead of the 5. That way it gave me those 2 extra days to try to grow my business, find clients, work on my website, the networking, all the stuff to just kind of get myself geared up. And the more I did it, I was like, I don't have time for this 3 days a week now. I need to go full time so I
Okay.
can put all of my energy into what I was doing.
Well, I guess that speaks to too. If you're gonna fail at something, it better be at something that you love doing. Because quite honestly, if you're doing something that you love, you're probably not going to fail at it, right? As I think that's the point. Is just we can get caught up so much in just the day-to-day grind, and we just don't see that there could be other opportunities out there for us, and then it becomes that fear of taking that leap. When do you take that leap? What so talk to me a little bit more about when you knew it was time to kind of finally pull that lever and go forward.
Just like as the clients started to increase and I started enjoying the freelance, when I couldn't wait to get home from that day job to start my second job, because I wasn't enjoying
Mm,
the daytime anymore. I
right,
was
right.
looking forward to drawing and creating and, or even just working on my own website and working on my own portfolio. That I knew it was time when I was miserable and there'd be days when I was crying and, I'm like,
Hmm.
hey, it is time to try this. And if it doesn't work out, we can always find another job. There's always,
Right. Okay.
so that
That
was,
makes sense. That makes sense. So would the 8-year-old version of you be proud of who you become?
oh my gosh, yes. Like I said before, I feel like growing up, it was beaten in my head that if you're going to do anything with art, you're going to be a starving artist. You're not going to make it. That this would be the worst choice to go to school for art, which led me to pursue graphic design, because I was like, but I love to draw. I want to do something with what I love. So what is there out there that I can do? So again, I have my degree in graphic design as opposed to going for fine art or illustration, because I thought that's the only thing I can do is create layouts and billboards and things like that with my art. My illustration is completely self-taught, and yeah, that 8-year-old would be super proud that, like, I made it and you're
Good,
doing something with it. This
good.
isn't just a hobby, or, I've heard that so many times, like, oh, your art's nice and all, but that's something you do for fun on the side, So
Mm. See, I just think it's mind blowing to me that people would recommend that you go do something that they, in their mind, is because it's not art. Like what? Go take a job that you're going to hate and be miserable at, and work 40 hours a week and feel unfulfilled and just all the other stuff that comes along with that, as opposed to doing what you love, doing what you feel like you were put here to do, having fun while you're doing it. Like I'm a big believer in all those things can line up. You can have fun at what you do. When you have a passion for it, it doesn't feel like work. You attract people into that world and you get paid. That's a beautiful thing. That's the way it's supposed to be.
absolutely.
And we're in a time now where, you know, listen, the factory jobs, I mean, they're just not there like they used to be, where people would kind of come out of school and, especially around, you look around here in Allentown, Bethlehem, we had Bethlehem Steel, we had Mack Truck, these were big manufacturing area here. And, a lot of the, we don't have it anymore. I mean, this area has come back tremendously from those early, late 70s, early 80s, when there was just like, it just seemed like every other day there was a layoff at these big places. But so you don't just do beer cans though. Like you do other stuff, right? Like you were mentioning, you're doing billboards, what are some of the other projects that you're working on?
Yeah, like for instance, Spirit Trust Lutheran, the nursing community, pocket folders, trifold brochures, updates to flyers, just different HR documents and things like that. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see mainly craft beer community type stuff. But there's a ton of other stuff that I call it my money bucket that might not be as creative, that is just the graphic design of, like, maybe it's just a flyer for an event or a poster, or different things. If it's just a down and dirty kind of email blast, or I do a lot of banners for like Facebook for like the Zoom events for churches and different
Okay.
things like
Okay.
that. So there's a lot of little things behind the scenes that you won't typically see me share if it's not beer related. But yeah, I definitely dip my hands in any graphic design that comes my way.
Okay. How do you find it difficult to be doing the work while you're trying to get new work? How do you strike that balance?
It definitely is a balance. Just being a sole,
Mhm.
entrepreneur, just a one person shop, trying to, designate maybe specific 2 days a week where I'm doing, I call it the typey and the emails and the networking or the PR, social media posts, and then having specific other days where I'm in full creative mode.
Mm.
Because trying to kind of mix the two, your brain, my brain at least, has trouble starting and stopping. Like, okay, I'm going to have a call today and a Zoom, and, then I'm going to like try and do a contract, and then I'm going to, do the accounts receivable and payable. I try to keep all the clerical stuff on one day, and then have open studio time and creative time just to blast things out and draw.
Right,
So
right.
it's
Okay. Okay. So what advice could you give, some maybe a young designer coming out of school and thinking, I don't know if I want to go work in an agency and kind of do all that stuff and kind of get lost. What do you say to that person in terms of like how they could, embrace their own inner entrepreneur? What kind of advice would you have for somebody like that?
I would say, definitely I would recommend working at an agency, or, even a sign shop, or what have you. I have absolutely no regrets in the 15, 18 years that I put in before I got to where I'm at, because like we talked about earlier, I've learned so much, good and bad, and what works in a small company, and how to, just the processes, that you're not always the creative person. There's some days I don't even get to open Photoshop or Illustrator, just learning how to create a contract and send an invoice and work with a client and network, and all the different things that go into owning a business. It's not just, let me get out here and the clients are going to find me. So it's definitely I've been building, I don't know if you would say a reputation, but just working with clients and building that client base for years. And especially even having that bank account, because when you first, at least for me anyway, when you first take that leap of faith, you're not going to make money right away. I definitely missed that paycheck from the 9 to 5, because now you're hustling on your own. And every week is, where's that money coming? Where's that money coming? Even if you're working on a project, it's not done until the project's done. So how am I paying my car payment, my mortgage, and eating this week? So
Right,
it's
right.
definitely, you got to be 3 steps ahead to make sure the money's coming in each step of the way. So I would recommend getting the experience, because you're going to meet so many other designers. You're going to learn so many other processes that will streamline what you're doing. Having that experience, and have a savings, because it's definitely, within the first year, you're going to be dipping into that to make sure you can pay your bills, because it's there's a lot of ups and downs in owning a business, I've found out. And it's hard. It's not for everyone. It's some days, weeks I'm working 70, 80 hours a week, evenings, weekends, and I miss that 9 to 5 of, here's your paycheck every week. Now it's, a month from now, I'm getting paid for something that I finished in August, or you're having to hound that client, like, okay, when you paying this invoice, as opposed to just having that money drop in your account.
Right,
So
right. Like
yeah.
there was a book out a couple years ago. I think it was called The Entrepreneurial Myth, the E-Myth, where, let's say you're really good at like bricklaying, right? So what you want to do is, I want to start a business laying bricks. So you start your business. Next thing you know is like you're doing payroll, you're doing payroll taxes, you're doing medical, you're buying insurance, you're doing everything but laying bricks. And now you've hired other people to lay bricks. So you're supervising them, right? So it's like, I can see what you're talking about this, how it's like, yeah, you have to be able to balance the time when you're creating. And those are two different sides of the brain. One side is for the drawing and the art, and then the other side has to be like you got your business hat on when you do, your taxes, and making sure, like, invoices are coming in or your invoices are going out, right? So you gotta, yeah, that's, to me, that's probably the biggest balance that has to be met, and that's, not everyone's always cut out for that aspect of it, because they
Yeah.
just kind of want to do the one thing. They just, they go into business because they want to do that thing that they love, which is good. But like you said, you need that, the rest of that, and you can get a lot of that and learn a lot of that while you're at another company,
Yes. Yeah.
and
Well, while you're
yeah.
that graphic designer full time at that company, because when you start your own business, like you just said, you're not just the graphic designer. You're a jack of all trades. You're wearing so many hats and trying
Mhm.
to balance it all. Sometimes I do ask myself, I'm like, wait. I remind myself, why did I get into this? I'm not in the business of creating estimates every day, because you can spend a ton of time making an estimate for a client and not get the job.
Yep,
So that's unpaid time. That's
that's right.
unbillable time. Yeah, there's, a lot of little things that you do as a business owner that aren't the graphic design or the creative illustrator that, you dreamed of. So even your web design and PR, just everything like that. Being your
Yeah,
own salesman is key too.
sure, sure. How do you do with that stuff? Do you feel like you do okay with it? Like, do you like going out and networking with people and talking to people?
At first, no. I'm the typical artist, the introvert that wants to hide under my desk, and I'm like, I just want to draw all day. I
Hmm.
just want to do the cool stuff. And I really had to push myself out of that bubble, because I was used to working at agencies and other jobs where you just have that art director coming to you, and here's the job, here's the stuff, here's what we need. And now it was, you got to go out and hunt and find those clients and talk to them and have personal relationships and put yourself out there and in front of the camera, and all those things that are scary. But again, it comes easier with experience and time. It's if I got to talk to myself, go back in time and
Yep.
have a face to face with myself right out of college, I would be scared to death. I'd be like, ah. what are you talking about? All this stuff you have to do. So it's, getting the experience, and it comes in time, it's
Yeah.
not something
Well, I
happens.
always thought that that was a neat thing, that if you were open to learning, which is lifelong, by the way, which I tell that when I speak at my colleges and universities, I tell this a lot of the students, don't think just because when you're done with college that you're done learning. It just,
Oh,
it's just
no.
starting, and it's lifelong, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it's just, like what you said, pushing yourself out of that comfort zone, because that's where the real learning will happen. Um, so let me ask you this. You have a tremendous amount of work, that I mentioned earlier. Like, what's like some of your favorite projects that you got to work on? I mean, in terms of like from the beer can side.
I was gonna say one of my first projects was actually from moonshine.
Oh,
So that was super fun
what
to work.
brand is that?
Lightning Shack. It's oh, Bald Hills Distillery. They were up in Dover. They
Let me see that.
unfortunately
Turn it so I can see the cover. It's like a log cabin, kind of like
log cabin
with
and
the
the little
still,
old
and
moonshine
okay.
still.
Oh, I
Yeah.
like that. Now,
So
did you
that was
design that label as well?
yeah, that was super fun to work on.
Wow.
Just keeping it black and white, like you said. I love the pen and ink, the line
Yeah.
art. But then it's cool to start incorporating the color, the monochromatic stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, what is that called?
this one is Sinking Ship. So it's a coconut porter. So there's, the ship that hit the iceberg. It's sinking in this cold water that's filled with coconuts. So these are super fun
I
to
love the
do.
colors on that. That's like, what are the,
Oh,
it's like
thank
a
you.
blue and an orange and a,
Yeah,
yeah.
yep. It's a cold brew beer. So
Okay.
with
Oh, I
the,
like the,
the
I like
color
the,
palette.
I like the steel, the aluminum can there. Like this, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
it's different color.
it's almost like got a bluish tinge to it.
Right, right. I really like that. That's
But
cool.
yeah, so this was a super fun one to work on, because then we took the can art and made coasters and other stuff with it. So that's always,
Well, and I would imagine too, you get into t-shirt designs, right? There's things that can be done there.
yep,
Mugs,
t-shirts,
coffee mugs,
coasters.
or yeah. Okay. I did promise you that I would show you the one thing. This is the beer can Bible.
Oh, yes.
You would love this, because all it is just page after page of beer cans.
Ah, that's so cool.
And this is the best part. Ready? That right there is Dick Yingling's signature.
Oh my gosh, like Yingling,
Dick
like,
Yingling,
oh my gosh.
the man. And it says,
Wow.
Bill, with much appreciation for your interest in beer. Sincerely, Dick Yingling. And the reason I got that was when I worked at the agency, we were in a pitch with them to do some creative for them. And we made it to the last round, and we didn't get the work, but he was coming out of the shop one day and off the floor, and I saw him and I had it in my hand, and I just said, can you sign my beer can Bible? I thought, what is that?
That's
I mean, it literally
awesome.
is the beer can Bible, the beer can collector's Bible. And
That's Wow, that's
I
such a
still
great
have it.
book, and have his signature in there is just a two for one. Like,
Yeah,
wow.
I should put this on eBay or something.
Oh, it would probably sell for, yeah. Oh my gosh.
I mean, Yingling, that's America's oldest brewery. I mean, they got the title. But yeah, so that was a fun little thing. I don't know. I should do something with my cans. I always thought that I would do a bar. If I had a bar like in a basement, I would put the cans all like behind me,
Line
but
them.
they just ended up staying up in my attic.
Oh, you'll have to dig them out. That's so inspiring. It's neat to
Yeah,
hear that like that you collected them as a kid.
I
Uh,
had them. My dad built shelves in my room. So my bed was in the room, and on each side of my bed were shelves that went from the floor to the ceiling, and just as high, each space was just enough for one beer can. And I don't know, probably at that time, maybe 300 of them. Yeah. And
and
I would always, they fascinated me. I would pull them down. I would look at them. Some of them were very intricate. It just learning about how beer was, when it was originally put in cone tops, when it went in cans, and then it went into flat tops, and then people didn't want to really drink it out of cans because they thought it affected the taste. If you've ever heard about those old stories. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot of lore and history around beer in this country. In fact, you could make the argument that beer is the reason America exists. Do you know why?
It
Because
brings people together.
no, beer was on the Mayflower, because beer wouldn't go bad. So that liquid they could drink. If they put water on, that could, it could go bad. It could get, beer
Bacteria.
beer
Yeah.
isn't going to, because of the process. So that's what helped the Pilgrims, kind of, go through on the Mayflower, was beer. So beer could really be, say like, it helped found America, because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to like make the journey. They needed liquid, and beer was on the Mayflower.
That's interesting. There's so much history. I'm learning like so much about, like, even I was reading somewhere about, like, I guess the monks were the first ones to do like the labeling and like the sanitary stuff, like just different stuff with the beer. And
well, even just some marketing things that, like, from years ago, Schlitz did a campaign many years ago. They came out with a campaign where they basically said, we steam clean our bottles. Okay. Every brewery steam cleans their bottles, but no one was saying it. And because it was at a time when cleanliness and, people that was a top of mind kind of concern, Schlitz capitalized on it, and they rode that wave to success with the steam clean your bottles. Because what are you going to do? Be the next brewery come out and say, we steam clean our bottles too? You're going to look stupid, right?
Yeah,
Schlitz kind of did it on that campaign. And yeah, I mean, just there's been so much creative that was created around for ads, even on the Super Bowl around beer, Budweiser, and look at the resurgence Pabst has had. Pabst back in my day was like, you wouldn't even touch that stuff, right? Now it's celebrated as like this.
It's an up and coming kind of new age thing again. And they just had a can contest. Actually, they opened it. I think this was the first year they opened it worldwide, like, or global. So they were like going to pick, I think, 10 different entries. I didn't get a chance to enter in that one. But yeah, that would be something I would recommend, if there's students out there looking to get into, even the beer industry or building your portfolio, enter contests, when you see them and you have time, just keep creating stuff every day. Yeah,
I agree. So if somebody wanted to kind of, look at your stuff or kind of get in touch with you, or can you share some of that information in terms of like your website and, just where people can go to see your work, so, because I think people should absolutely go look at your work, because it's exceptional. It's fun. I can tell you, Jen, when I look at it, I could tell you're having fun creating it. I don't know if that's,
oh, that's good to hear.
That's just me, because I've been in this field so long. Like, that kind of stuff, I can look at a design and know whether that person was having fun creating it. And you just look like you're having a blast creating all this stuff.
Yeah, it is. I love sharing each step of the way, and then the most rewarding part is when the beer comes out from the brewery to, go to either the tap room or the distributor and find that can and then take it home and sample it, because it's got your artwork on it. So it's a whole experience for me, not just as the designer and the artist, but, the head brewer and the brewmaster put a lot of time and effort into that beer. So pairing it with my art, with all that craftsmanship, it's a work of art in itself, between the liquid and the label, and so to enjoy it. But
right. Both of them involved an amount of craft, right? The label design and what gets created inside of it. Did they have like when they have a new beer that comes out, do they have like tasting parties? Is there like a launch party that you get to go to?
Yeah, sometimes I've been down to Monument City down in Baltimore for some tastings and stuff when things came out, and that's always a hoot. That's super fun to try different stuff before it would even come out to market, and just to be involved in that whole process, because everybody in the beer industry is super passionate, because there's so much time and energy and even money involved in everything, between picking and selecting certain hops and malts that are quality, or where they
Sure.
came from, or where they were grown, to, I put a lot of time and passion into the art, but to hear how long it fermented and brewed, and then to taste it. And so everyone that's sitting there doing a little sample is just, there's just so much passion going on between everybody that is involved in the process. So
Well, you just said something that reminded me of a question I wanted to ask. How'd you come up? Well, what the name of your design studio? What's the significance? What's the backstory?
Hoot. You can find me at hootdesignstudio.com, and I'm primarily social media, Instagram. So if you just type in Hoot Design
Okay.
Studio, I'll pop up there. LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter a little bit, and Behance. But the concept behind it, my first business name was Jen's Creative Designs, and I opened that as an LLC. So Hoot is a DBA of that. And my first logo was an owl, and the tagline was "See and hear the difference in your distinctive marketing." So playing off the acute senses of the owl. I love nature. I love birds. And the owl just represents that knowledge and experience that I've gained along the way, the detail that I put into my work, and seeing the difference, because there's a lot of graphic designers out there that I've worked with that are amazing at layout, composition, but they can't draw. So I started marketing myself as hearing and seeing the difference, because I'm not just a designer, I'm also an artist.
Right.
So yeah, that's
Right.
where it originated from.
Okay. Did I should have asked this earlier. Apologize that I didn't. Did your dad get to see you make the transition over to what you're doing now? Did he get to know that you did that?
He did not. I told him along the way that different things that I was working on. But with the dementia, there's good and bad days.
Sure.
And um,
Okay.
yeah, so I don't think he quite knew what was happening, but I know he would have, been proud and super supportive of the
Absolutely.
journey. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, that's just really cool that he expressed that to you. It's almost like it gave you permission. It gave you the permission that you needed to kind of take that leap, and parents' words, they can have a lot of impact, especially when it's a positive, something positive like that. And I love that he did that for you.
yeah, it was like I had permission. Like the
Yeah.
small child in me said,
Yep.
it's okay to be an artist and do what you love. Take a chance.
Yep.
Because, visiting him in the nursing home and seeing the,
Yeah.
progression of his health, and just thinking about my own life and my journey.
Sure.
And is this what I want to do? Or do I want to take a chance and try to do what I love? So yeah, it was an incredible feeling of hearing that from him, and that's, I think,
Yeah.
something that's going to stick with me forever.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you that I've had people try to talk me out of going into the field that I went in, just because of the same reason. I don't know why there's not a term for a starving accountant or a starving electrician. I don't know why. Like, why is it, artists get the title starving artist? It's like, come on, there's a lot of
We need
people
to
that
change that.
I know we need a better public relations person, because I'll tell you, I do a lot of work around creativity, and that's another term that when people hear, it's like, oh God, here we go. They lava lamp, beanbag chairs, and foosball tables. That's what most people's perception is when they hear the word creativity. Oh, you're gonna go be creative,
Yep,
right?
yes.
Which means no working, right? Like, no.
Yep.
I'm
You're not getting
sorry.
paid.
Right. I'm sorry that thinking doesn't really look like anything, other than you just staring, thinking, and actually those other little things like foosball tables and stuff, those just take your mind off what you're trying to think on, so your subconscious can work on it. But that's another conversation. But so we need a better PR person to kind of move away from that starving artist crap. I've always
Yeah.
hated that,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't trade the career that I've had, because I've worked with some absolutely amazing people. I'm still working with them. Every day is different. I love this field. I love it. I wouldn't be doing a podcast on it, if I didn't love talking to people about it and sharing, knowledge. So yeah, I'm glad I chose the career that I did. And and I'm proud of the work that I've done. I'm still doing it. And, obviously you are as well, which is why I wanted to reach out to you and why I wanted to talk to you and have you on Ad Yack.
Awesome. Definitely. I feel the same. And I just, I encourage anybody out there that, loves to draw or, anything creative, like don't listen to the starving artist thing. I feel like I've heard that my whole career too of, oh, it's nice to just go paint and stuff. But, it's like, they don't see it the way,
Well, they mean well. They're trying
Yeah.
to save you from, disappointment. But you know what? Thanks, but I'll serve my own disappointment. If I'm going to be disappointed, it's going to be on something that I choose to do, right? Not what someone else wants me to do,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So Jen, with that, I want to thank you so much. Jen Borror, Hoot Design Studio. Your work is awesome. I hope people go check it out. And thanks for being on Ad Yack. I hope you had fun.
I did. I think we could talk forever. I'm looking forward to seeing that beer can collection out of your attic. You gotta bring that down and send me some photos.
You know what? I'll send you some of my pen and inks. So my pen and ink drawings.
Yes.
So you can see, because I saw that you're into the stipple. I was all about the stipple. Boom, 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 boom. Love that technique.
Yes, I love that detail. It's so different than what a lot of people are doing. So
Yeah.
Cool.
And thank you
I look
very
forward
much.
to that.
Be well and continued success.
You too. Thanks again for having me.
You're welcome. All right, Ad Yackers. Hope you enjoyed it, because we have many more great conversations planned and guests lined up ready to yak it up. Ad Yack is sponsored and produced by ASR Media and Lehigh Valley with Love. Theme song was written and performed by Dan Ross. Location recording was at JT Norman's Design Studio. Ad Yack is the official podcast of the AAF Greater Lehigh Valley Ad Club. Stay hungry, stay humble. Till next time.
This episode of Ad Yack is rated O for, oh man, that was good.